Hello, everyone. It is time to dive into the next episode of The Witcher Netflix, episode 6. So I have been doing a series of videos where I just go through each episode of The Witcher Netflix and give my thoughts, my perspective on the episode. So this will be a very special episode for me because this story in particular is my favorite story of the first two Witcher books, Sword of Destiny and The Last Wish. This short story is my favorite. I feel like a lot of people say that this is their favorite story of the two books. I think because it's really a true adventure story. Obviously, we get a lot of stories of Geralt fighting these different monsters and having conflict and resolution, but I think this story is very typical adventure, D&D style, where there's a whole party gathered and their mission is to kill a dragon. And it's just kind of exciting in that way, and there's lots of different twists, and I don't know, overall it's a really, really cool story. But I do have a lot to say about this episode in particular. I have a lot of thoughts on this one, but I'll try to keep it short, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into episode 6, Rare Species.
I want you to join my team.
So let's just go ahead and start off with the new introduced characters in this. Borch, Three Jackdaws, Taya, and Vea. I absolutely love Taya and Vea. They look like amazing Zerrikanian badasses. And the minute I saw them, I was just, it made me so happy to see them. Borch is a little bit different from what I pictured in my head. He's obviously a lot older. Though I will say the actor is actually quite good in this show, and I think he does a great job as Borch. Overall, I was very much pleased, and I was like, I like this guy. But he is a little bit older than what I thought, and he also doesn't have the Three Jackdaws logo that they talk about in the book, which I thought was kind of an iconic thing about him as a character, and they didn't include that. It's not the biggest deal, obviously, but it was just kind of a few observations that I had, and I was like, oh, okay. But the minute they showed up and they appeared on the screen, I just had this happiness inside because I knew where this adventure was going to go, which I actually now remember. I should probably say spoiler warning now. I talk about spoilers from the show, and I talk about some spoilers in the books, so if you don't like spoilers, just keep that in mind. I would love to have watched this episode with somebody who doesn't know the twist in the story about Three Jackdaws. So I would love to just see somebody's reaction to that, because for me, I already know what happens. It's exciting for me because I want to see how it's portrayed in the show, but I would love to see the reaction of somebody who didn't know this big spoiler that he's villain Turner Mirth. So as far as the other characters that we meet in this adventuring party, obviously we have Geralt Jaskier and we have Yennefer. But I must say that the dwarves are really amazing. Yarpen is so great. Also, the Crinford Reavers were done. I mean, they're not like the most prominent characters, I think, in this story. They're total assholes and jerks in the books, and I hated them.
I'd say something strange was afoot, but then again, witches are bound to bump into monsters eventually.
Yes, you.
Yennefer.
The crow's feet are new.
Yeah, well, your jokes are old.
So I just want to take a moment to appreciate the dialogue between Yennefer and Jaskier right there. Because one thing I always noticed when I was reading the books is that Yennefer and Jaskier, or Dandelion, definitely did not like each other a lot of the time, and they did kind of have this back and forth dialogue that happened very often. And the fact that they included that in the show, it reminded me of those moments, and it was pretty great. They definitely, both of them are very witty and quick to come up with these kind of insults or little jabs at each other, and we got a little glimpse of that in this moment.
For kingdom and glory.
And then there's Sir Ike, who, I was not a fan of the portrayal of Sir Ike here. I think the big issue that I have here is that Sir Ike is just the comedic relief of this entire episode, and the comedic relief isn't even that funny. We'll see later on there's the fart poop jokes and things like that, where it's just like, I don't know, it just wasn't funny to me. I don't mind having some comedic relief in these Witcher episodes, but I feel like the way they did it with Sir Ike was just really juvenile and just dumb. Like, really, I'm just not a big fan of dumb humor like that, and he had a lot of that in this episode. In the book, he is a real jerk, and he basically has this whole rant about why he is better than everybody else, and he just comes off more pretentious to me than he does just stupid. So I don't know, there was something about his portrayal here that just didn't settle well with me. I think he was just too much of the butt end of too many jokes, and it didn't really get his ultimate pretentious side that I was really expecting.
But why?
He is the most beautiful.
So I love that they included that line. That line, "He is the most beautiful," is in fact a line from the story, and it's a really cool line because she does say that. I think she says it to Geralt, or does she say it to Dandelion? I don't remember who she says it to, but then later on when they do discover that he is the dragon, at the very end, it's like, you're right, he is the most beautiful. And it was just such a really, it was like a heartwarming line, you know? And so when they had that line, that was one of those moments where it instantly brought me back to the story. And it made me really appreciate that the writers included that line in this particular episode. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier with the poop and fart jokes. It just was not very funny to me. Though I did like some of the dialogue that everybody had sitting here at the campfire here. So I do like that they have a little political talk here, talking about the state of the world. It also does help gather a little bit about the timeline for people who might have been confused about the timeline. But also it's just cool to really talk about what's going on in the world. But I find this line that Borch says very interesting. I don't know if he actually meant this as a slight toward Yennefer, like somehow he knew the whole story of what was going on in Aretuza. I don't know how he would know, or if he was just kind of saying that as a random thought that came into his mind. It's just something that they kind of wanted to throw in there as dialogue, essentially. But I think it is kind of an interesting thing for Yennefer to ponder, and for us as viewers to ponder that, hey, maybe things could have been different if Yennefer was the lead sorceress for Nilfgaard, like she was supposed to be. And it just kind of leaves you thinking for a moment. So I like that they added that little dialogue in there. Oh yeah, by the way, there is a whole other plot line going on here. Ciri's plot, which to me was just, I don't know, from this point, I think from this episode moving forward, it just, like, it got more and more weird to me, and I wasn't really feeling it. This whole Doppler thing, I think it could have been cool, but it just wasn't. I think Ciri's story when she was in Sintra was really interesting, and I was very much loving all of her Sintra timeline. But the minute she just started running, it just didn't have any interest to me. And it's a little disappointing because this is all new territory for the showrunners to explore and do their own thing with. Because like I've said in the past, this whole story here is not in the books. Okay, so we have no idea what's going on with Ciri all of this time. And so the showrunners could have done some things that could have been interesting, but in my opinion, it just wasn't interesting at all, and probably could have been left out, a lot of it. So I think once they finally get to the end of the story, the part where they actually reach the dragon, I think this is where things get a little, I don't know, muddy for me. And I really don't love the way the story ended. I think they missed a few key parts of the story that they should have maybe added in, or I don't know. Obviously, you can't include everything in a 50-minute episode. For one, the Crinford Reavers end up tying up Geralt, Yennefer, and Jaskier. Yennefer, they do some kind of bad things to Yennefer, which I'm glad is not included, but Yennefer has a very famous scene where she is, as they're trying to like untie themselves to help the dragon, basically. At this point, they are, have decided they're gonna try to help the dragon and not let them kill the dragon, Yennefer is able to cast a spell with her foot. And this is the first time we've ever seen a mage cast a spell like this. And it's a very, I don't know, it's a very famous moment for her. And I kind of wish that maybe they had included her foot spell casting. But yeah, then it's revealed that Borch is actually the dragon, the rarest of species, a golden dragon, which Geralt didn't even think existed. I think that the dragon in the show just kind of looks a little weird and not as epic as we were all hoping, but I'm not gonna blame the show for that, because obviously there's budget and CG things that hinder them from maybe making what they really wanted. So I'm not gonna say like this totally sucks, but yeah, in my mind I did kind of have this vision of this huge epic dragon that we would be seeing. Also, I feel like the way he talked, where it was just kind of like his voice emanating, was also kind of weird. I would have liked a more like echoey, booming dragon voice, which I guess could also come across cheesy, but this, to me, just having Borch talk was also kind of weird. I will say at least the fight scene for this episode was pretty cool. I actually liked watching this very hectic, chaotic scene with everybody fighting, including Yennefer. We get to see Yennefer fight for the first time, even in her attire, which is kind of weird. I know some people criticized this whole part, but I don't know. I kind of liked it. I thought the whole fight scene was pretty good. And see, this is the kind of comic relief that I appreciate. That Jaskier was asleep this entire time and missed all of the action. To me, this was actually really funny, and I thought it was hilarious. So the last thing I want to talk about for this video is this ending scene with Geralt, Yennefer, and 3 jackdaws. I think this dialogue was very interesting. Borch really had a lot to say here. He had a lot of input on things. He almost seems like he keeps... There's multiple times in this episode where I feel like he's kind of like foreseeing things or telling the future in a way and predicting things, and I don't know why. Just because he's a dragon doesn't mean he has like this, I don't know, maybe he's more insightful than the average person, and that's what they're trying to get at here. He says, I can see why Geralt didn't want to lose you. So he's talking about the wish that Yennefer made, and this obviously enrages Yennefer, but I don't think they actually had that conversation at any point. So either they just didn't show the conversation and maybe Geralt talked about this wish that he made with Borch, or he just has this keen insight or something where he's able to just say these things, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But I don't absolutely hate it. Like, I think that it adds some interesting dialogue and kind of pushes the plot forward, I guess. That actually leads me to another point where in the story, there was a lot of time between the last wish and this story. And apparently Geralt and Yennefer had been together for a while, and they kind of had a bit of a falling out and hadn't seen each other for a long time until now. And it seemed like they had been in a fight. We don't know the context of what the fight was, but they had apparently had a fight. Here, it seems more that the fight is happening now at the end of this story, where Yennefer is quite upset about Geralt making the wish with the djinn. And this is her first time finding it out. And I can understand that this is something that is very upsetting for her as a character. And then once again, we have Borch doing his little Oracle predict the future thing, where he basically says, yeah, Yennefer, you are not gonna ever have a child, and Geralt, you are eventually going to lose Yennefer. And it's like, okay. First of all, they're in the middle of this like fight that should be between them, and he just kind of steps in with these predictions of the future. If I was Geralt, I'd be like, all right, dude, who are you? We just met. I know you're a really cool dragon and all, but like, can you just let me deal with this thing with Yennefer and not interfere? And then here comes really, really angry Geralt, where he is so mean to Jaskier, and it actually breaks my heart. I think it breaks all of our hearts, really. Geralt, honestly, I am not a fan of this scene at all. Geralt is extremely mean to Jaskier. And I know the two of them have a relationship where Geralt definitely gets annoyed by Jaskier a lot. Or it never comes to a point where he's this mean to Jaskier, where it truly, like, you could see it. It hurts his soul right there. The stuff that he says is just so mean and horrible. And I understand that in this moment, here comes brooding Geralt, by the way. Brood! Ah! But it's understandable that he takes a little bit of this out on Jaskier. But I think it was a little extreme. And this is not something I think Geralt would ever do in the books. He's definitely expressed a lot of frustration with Dandelion, Jaskier, but not to this level. And I just wasn't really a fan of it. And I did feel really bad for Jaskier. And, you know, and that's how it ends. That's how it ends for the season. And it ends on this really rocky relationship. And I don't know, it makes me sad. I think overall for this episode, I started out really hyped when I first watched it, and I was very, very excited to see where this adventure would go. But at the end, it just kind of disappointed me overall. And I think it was this episode and moving forward where things got a little bit more disappointing for me in the series. Things went a little bit downhill as far as the story and the plot went, in my personal opinion. So overall, even though it was my favorite story in the book, I would say this was not my favorite episode at all. But let me know your thoughts. Maybe you absolutely love this episode and I want to hear why. Or maybe you too had some complaints about this episode. Let me know your thoughts below. I really do love hearing people's thoughts on the show. I love having that kind of discussion. And that's about it for me for this episode. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!